Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Reactor Sydney live stream. My name is Nadia. I'm the Community Engagement and Events Manager here at the Reactor in Sydney. Thank you all to those who are joining us either from the US or Canada as well. Welcome to today. Just a couple of things before we get started. The session will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. I will pop that link in the Q&A for you. And we'll also be taking Q&A throughout today's session as well. So feel free to leave your questions in the Q&A box. Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Damian Brady, who will be running today's session for you. Thank you, Damian.
Awesome. Thanks, Nadia. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me. It's another online virtual conference. I'm here in my kind of home office, which is much better than it used to be. I've been slowly getting things nice and pretty. You'll be able to see as well as we go through, you'll be able to interact a little bit with the lights above, just a little bit of a spoiler. And so hopefully it'll be a little bit more interactive. I've got the chat window open as well, so the Q&A window as well. Nadia will be moderating that and helping me find the right questions and so on, but feel free to ask any questions on the way through. So for those who don't know me, my name is Damian Brady. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft, and I've been talking about DevOps for ages. In some respects for longer than it's been called DevOps. So I'm really embedded in that world, and especially Team Foundation Server when that came out, and then it became Visual Studio Online, and then it became Azure Pipelines and Azure DevOps, and now the focus is turning a little bit to GitHub and to GitHub Actions. So I want to talk about that a little bit, and you've probably heard of GitHub Actions. A lot of you are probably using GitHub Actions. For those of you who haven't, though, it's probably a good idea to talk about what it actually is. So most of the time I hear people talking about GitHub Actions as a straight replacement for CI/CD stuff like Azure Pipelines or Jenkins or something along those lines. But it's actually a lot more. So it's not just CI/CD. The problem is that that's how it's usually used, and you wouldn't know it even from GitHub's kind of marketing material. So this is the list of all the things. This is a straight screenshot from the GitHub website of all the different things that GitHub can do. And you can see right there, CI/CD is the first one. There's no mention of actions specifically, just CI/CD. And if you drill in, you can see that they're talking about actions in respect of CI/CD, so continuous integration, continuous delivery, or continuous deployment. And now GitHub Actions is really good for that, or it's certainly really good for CI, and it's getting better and better for continuous delivery as well. And that's a really good solution, especially if your code is in GitHub, for actually doing CI/CD. So before we go on to the kind of CI/CD and beyond, let's look at the CI/CD part and see how you can do that with GitHub Actions. Now for most of this session, it's going to be demos. So I know how much people love looking at slides, especially online when you've got 1,000 distractions also on your computer. So let's just focus on demos. Right, little spoiler there early. Right, so here is our website. This is a Tailwind Traders website. And for those of you not familiar, Tailwind Traders is this fictional hardware supply company. For those of you in Australia, think, you know, Hammer Barn if you watch Bluey. So basically we sell plumbing equipment, electrical stuff, garden centers, things like that. We don't really care about this website beyond being able to make changes to it continuously and deploy those changes. So all of the code lives in GitHub. Now I've got it in my Demo Visa org, so an organization here, and it's Tailwind Traders 8040, which is the code for a different session that I did. But here's all the code. So all of it's in there. It walks you through how to use it. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to set up some GitHub Actions to do some CI/CD. Now, I've already kind of skipped ahead because this is not the most exciting part, but I'll show you how you can do this to start off with. If you go to Actions in GitHub and go to New Workflow, you can see that you have access to all of these templates that can kind of get you started. Now, the ones that have been suggested, basically because GitHub has identified that there's a lot of JavaScript in this repository, and there's a lot of .NET, but there's also a lot of JavaScript. So it's suggesting maybe I can set up a publish in Node.js package or Node.js one from GitHub Actions. or maybe deploy Node to Azure Web Apps or Amazon ECS or GKE or Terraform or anything like that. So you get all of these different templates that you can get started with. So let's say hypothetically I wanted to do this deploy Node to Azure Web App. I'll set up a workflow and it will give me this kind of starting workflow. Now we'll walk through what the syntax looks like because that's relevant regardless of what you're doing. But really it's just set up a bunch of things here, some triggers, some jobs and so on. I can commit this directly and it will create that workflow file in my repository, which will kick off a new workflow and try to deploy to Azure. Now, a couple of things to point out here. This is a YAML file, so yet another markup language. It's an alternative to JSON or XML or whatever you want. It's a really common format for use in CI/CD. But that file lives in a location in my repository in the .github/workflows location. Now I'm doing this through the UI and there's some reasons that I might want to do that, but I could also do this straight from VS Code or even the command line or anything like that. As long as that file exists in that location, GitHub will pick that up and run that as an action. It's a known workflow at that point. The advantages of having this in your repository as opposed to kind of on the side as a function of GitHub or a feature inside GitHub. Having it in your repository means that not only will people get your code when they clone it, they'll also get the way that you build and the way that you deploy your code. If they fork your repo, they will have everything they need to not just run your application, but to deploy it, build it and deploy it as well. It also helps with branching strategies. So if you're doing some work that requires a bit of a change to the way that you build and deploy your application, you don't have to have this kind of mismatch between the build definition and what the code looks like while you're working on that branch. You can have a branch which also changes the code and the workflow itself. So align those two and then merge back into your main branch. The other reason I might want to do it in the UI, by the way, is that these jobs here, you can see that there's a lot of just kind of YAML that you just kind of need to know or need to identify what it looks like. In this section on the right here, you can search the marketplace for actions. So if I wanted to deploy to Azure Web App or something, I could search for Web App and you can see, here we go, Azure Static Web Apps Deploy. And I can grab that one and it will show me all of the different things that are required in here. So what that actually looks like. I can copy and paste those ones there. Or I can skip to the documentation and it'll talk about what that syntax looks like in general. So you get this kind of nice UI here. I might also want to do it in Visual Studio Code, and there's some good reasons I might want to do that. So I jumped ahead a little bit and I actually have a .NET Core workflow here, and it's run a few times, but let's have a look at what this looks like. And we'll have a look at the syntax of this, but also you can see that you get kind of IntelliSense here, which is nice. So that's good old YAML. So you can get all of these different things that are available to do here. So you can run shell scripts or you can run actions and things like that. All right, I've seen something in Teams. Let's just quickly check that I don't have any more questions. Great. All right, so let's walk through what this syntax looks like. And this is true for any action that you create. It has a name. And then it has a series of triggers. So basically these triggers identify when this workflow will run. And for CI/CD, you're probably looking at push and you can specify certain branches, or you can ignore branches or ignore paths or look at specific paths or tags and things like that. Or you might want to do a pull request, for example. But you'll see, and we'll drill into this a little bit more, that there's a lot of different options available to you. So you can do it on creation of a new, I think that's a new repository. Let's see. Thought I had hover. Create. There's a whole bunch of other ones. When the deployment status changes, when there's a fork, Golem is actually something to do with the wiki. So when there's a change to the wiki, when there's comments on issues, members change, the project changes. So there's a huge number of triggers here, and we'll look at that in a little bit. And then you have your list of jobs. So a workflow consists of one or more jobs, and you can name them. This one I've called build, but you can call that whatever you want. You identify what system that it's going to run on. So here I've got it running on an Ubuntu machine, but I could also run it on Mac OS. I can self-host, or I can run it on Windows. But I'm going to leave it as Ubuntu 18.04. You can set environment variables, and then you have your collection of steps. For those of you as well familiar with Azure pipelines, these agents here, these machines that will run these builds, are actually the same images as the ones that Azure Pipelines uses. So it's the same repository, and that's open source as well. So you can actually go and have a look to see what that looks like, what that Ubuntu 18.04 machine looks like, to see whether it's going to meet your aims. Just a little bit of trivia there for you. Right, so, and then we have a section of our, a collection of steps, and these ones will just run one by one inside a job. We have either actions, or in this case, we've got some scripts that will run as well. So right now we're just doing a checkout action. We're doing our setup.NET Core to make sure we're targeting 2.1. Same thing with Node, targeting 10.x, 10 point whatever. And then we're doing a .NET Restore script, .NET Build, .NET Test. So when that finishes running, you'll see here we get all of the details about what happened and when. So it completed in 1 minute 22 seconds, reasonably fast. And here are all the steps. So when we did that actions checkout v2, this is what it did. And you can expand a lot of these things as well and drill in and find out exactly what went wrong at different points. Nothing's really hidden from you here. This is really important, getting access to these logs, because the way that the workflows work is they will spin up a hosted agent for you to run that task, and it's a brand new fresh one, so you don't get any kind of missing or any artifacts that are left over from anybody else's build. It's a brand new one for you. You do your build, and when the workflow completes, that gets torn down and taken away. So you can't get back to it to see, where the files are and things like that. Now that's advantageous because it means you get a fresh environment every single time. It's locked down to you. You have your access to everything you need, and then it gets torn away. So that's a good thing, but it can also be a negative, because if you do your build and then you want to grab that artifact afterwards or have a look at where things landed, you might have to end up doing a whole bunch of debug statements or logging just to get those bits of information. There are other ways you can manage this as well. So you can self-host. You can actually have an agent running on your own machine, and obviously we're not going to tear that down once you finish building. So that'll give you a little bit of help if you can do that. Or you can send artifacts back up to GitHub as well if you want to use them later. So let's just add a couple of things we want here. So you'll see that this is completed, and I've seen that it's built and it's successful, but I don't have anything that I can deploy. So we've got the CI part, but the CD part is still missing. So let's look at doing that. All right, let's see if I've got my snippets. Excellent. Let's just close this one. All right, so I'm going to do a .NET publish, and I'm just going to zoom in a tiny bit. Do a .NET publish. So I've done my build and my test. Now I'm going to do a publish, and that'll package it up, put it in a staging folder in release mode, ready for me to actually deploy it. And then I need to deploy the action itself, the application itself. So here I'm going to use a deploy to website or a web apps deploy action from Azure. Now there's a few things here. One is the name of the app, which is, we saw that before. The other one is a secret, and I'll get into secrets in just a second. And then we need to point at where that package is. So in this case, it's going to be in that same staging folder, but underneath the web app itself. The other thing which is worth mentioning at this point as well is any of these actions, if you go to, for example, if you copy this before the version, copy it before the version, and maybe jump to github.com/Azure/WebAppsDeploy, you'll find the repository. So this is a known action, it's a GitHub action, but all of these, all of this is open source. So you can see exactly what's going to run when you run that action. In most cases, they'll give you a bit of a walkthrough of how to do things. And in the case of the web app deploy, they've got sample starter templates for a lot of these different languages and platforms. So you can start there and copy and paste rather than using the templates that GitHub Actions gives you. So that's cool. You also, if you wanted to, can do this and go to Azure Actions, I believe, if I can spell it correctly. And this is all of the actions for Azure. And there are a lot. There's login, CLI, PowerShell, there's stuff for ARM templates, Key Vault, web apps, serverless. There's a lot of different ones, and each of those give you an example of how to actually get started and use those ones. The actions themselves, there are a ton of them, and I'll look at that in a little bit. I just want to kick off this this deployment just so you can see what it actually looks like. I'm going to do one more thing just before we do, and that is we're going to actually indent that, good old YAML indenting. I'm going to upload that artifact. So we've packaged this into a folder. So all of the stuff we need to deploy is in this staging folder. And what I want to do is upload all of that to GitHub Actions. And that means I can grab it later on if I want to examine what's in it to see if there's some problems. Or if I want to just do a little local deployment or something like that, that'll give me access to that. So I'm going to commit and push this one. And then I'm just going to mention as well, one of the other things we might want to do is split this up. So right now we're doing CI and CD all in one job, right? So we're just doing it all in that build job. What that means is it'll just go from start to finish. It'll build it, and if that build fails, it'll kick out at that point. But I might want to take that artifact and deploy it to a test environment and see if that works. And if that works, deploy it to a staging environment and then a production environment and so on. So what I normally do is split this actual deployment into a separate job. So at least I have that kind of control over those two different jobs that are separate. Now, uploading the artifact will definitely help. What that means is that second job will be able to pull that artifact down and deploy it that way. So let's actually do that while the other one's running, and we'll get all of this because thankfully we can do a lot of copy paste with this. I think that's it. All right, so that one's not going to be called build. This one's going to be called release. The other thing we need to say is that it needs the build to run. So it needs that previous job to run. And if I don't put that in, it'll try to do these two jobs in parallel and presumably will fail because this artifact hasn't been created yet. I also need to add a step to pull down that artifact. And again, I can actually just do a bit of a copy paste. Turns out that upload artifact has a matching download artifact. And they look very similar, right? I'm going to just simplify this a bit because we don't have that source Tailwind Traders web thing. So I'm just going to put it in a staging folder and deploy from that staging folder too. All right, I'm going to kick this one off in a sec as well. But while that other one's running, I just want to talk about this secrets that I kind of skipped before. So secrets are a way of hiding information that you don't want or that's important to your deployment or your build that you don't want in your repository. So in this case, I have a publishing profile to deploy to my production website. I obviously don't want that to sit in my repository. That's a pretty terrible idea. So instead, I want to set up a secret in GitHub so that I can pull that information down. It doesn't get put into logs. It only gets used as required when that workflow is running. So to do that, I go to settings in my repository. And then, where are we? Secrets. And you'll see I've got a bunch of secrets in here for various things. So in my case, what one was I using? I was using publish profile prod. And so there's publish profile prod. Now, the good thing about this is I can update it or I can remove it. I can't read it again. So if somebody gets access to my repository, they can't pull that information out. They can't get that publishing profile. It's kind of a write-only situation. And so that's a great way of kind of hiding this information. I've got a few more that I'm using for various other things that we'll have a look at later. All right, I think I've given that other one enough time that it's going to be ahead of this one. So let's do multi-job. We'll push this one as well. So let's just quickly jump back to our actions and see where we're up to. And I'm realizing as well, I didn't actually change any of the code, so this isn't going to look great. So we're going to deploy to Azure here, and where are we up to? We're doing the deploy to website now. So that's going to kick off. It's going to deploy to that website, and it's going to, there you go. It's going to update that website. In this case, not really with anything because I didn't change any code. Let's just check. Yeah, it's just going to say $4.99 or more orders. So we won't see any changes because I forgot a step. All right, I'm going to add one more thing just because I'm going to run a few of these in parallel. We can see what they do later. I'm just going to add one more thing, which is a bit of a preview to the next set of demos. And that is a little step here called from LifeX, which is the company that makes the light bulbs that are behind me, those colored lights. And this is an action that was built by LifeX actually to do kind of an in progress build light situation. So this one's going to say it's in progress. And then right at the end, when I've finished deploying, I'm going to do a, what are we? So there we go. I'm going to do a job status. So the good thing about this one is it actually will match the job.status, like that variable that's known at build time or at workflow runtime, and it will match that to colors in the light. I also need to put this specifier in here to say always run this step. By default, if any of these steps fail, then the whole thing stops. If I say, you know, always run this, then it makes it much easier to actually run that task every single time. So I'll still get that build light to change even if we fail. All right, so let's just put some lighting in there. Push. By the way, this repository that I've got here, demovisa.org Tailwind Traders ADO 40, I'll put that in the chat as well. Feel free to explore that. Submit pull request if you really want. It's demo though, so I probably won't actually approve any. Feel free to have a look at that. I'll paste that in the chat as well. All right, so let me just change some lights. You might have seen just then, if you're watching my camera, that the light behind me just changed. I'm just going to change the color on the strip to make it a bit more neutral. Okay, cool. So we can see that lighting is running now. And when that finishes, we'll get our job completion. All right. So cool, we did some stuff. Oh, awesome. Nadia's already put that link in there. Great. Similar to a question here. This is similar to Ant, Maven, and Gradle. I assume Gradle. That's a good question. Ant, I'm not super familiar with Ant. Maven, I thought, was a package repository for Java. Am I wrong? Feel free to dump that clarification there if you want. Gradle, I think, is a tool that you can run to do builds for JavaScript apps. Is that right? I'm not getting great answers to this question. Ultimately, what GitHub Actions lets you do is it lets you run anything that's being created into an action, but it'll also let you run any script. So if it's something that you can script, something that you can run on the command line, you can absolutely do it as part of your build or as part of your workflow. So the other question from Simeon as well, can it be set to the other environments like Python and JS? Yeah, so the example I gave was a .NET app that had a lot of JavaScript in it. You can absolutely run Python. You can do pretty much anything you want. There's a couple of other things I didn't show you as well, like the agents themselves. Here I was just choosing from runs on Ubuntu, but I can also specify a container. Oops, did it give me any information? No. So I can also specify a container, and what the container will do is it will actually spin up a container inside that agent itself. So if I have a defined container that contains all of the resources that I need, like a Docker container, I can get a step to run in that container. So I can specify this as well at the job, but I can also have a step or an action that runs inside a container as well. So the action itself can specify in what context it runs. Yeah, so container is a great way of kind of setting up any environment you want, but ultimately, if you can script it or if there's an action for it, it's something that you can do with GitHub Actions. Need to do that. Cool. Multi-data pipelines. Also, Maven is like NuGet. Yeah, you could pull down Maven. You could also push to Maven. I have no doubt that in Actions, oh, wrong one. I have no doubt that in Actions, there will be, let's just look at the marketplace. If I search for Maven as an action, yeah, there's 27 results. So I can do heaps of stuff using actions that people already have in Maven, or NuGet will be there in there as well. Multi-data pipelines. So if you're talking about things like data migrations and transformations and things like that, you can probably do that in GitHub Actions. There's a limited time that an action or a workflow can run for, and it's quite large. I think it's something like 72 hours in total, but it's not really designed for that kind of work. And each step as well is restricted even further. I can't remember the exact numbers, but for large kind of data work, it's not kind of the ideal tool for it, I don't think. There are some other tools around there that are good for that. If that's what you're asking, Simeon, and feel free to clarify as well. Rob says, very similar to Azure DevOps, so multi-stage YAML pipelines. What's the use case for choosing one over the other? That's a question we get constantly. I would say if your code is in GitHub, have a look at GitHub Actions. Not because Azure Pipelines is going anywhere. There's no plans to get rid of that. Microsoft is incredibly heavily invested internally in Azure Pipelines, and there's still a couple of hundred developers actively working just on Azure DevOps. But a lot of the focus, especially for the new stuff, is going towards GitHub Actions. So if your code is in GitHub and GitHub Actions can do everything you want it to do, then I would lean towards Actions. So my preference is Actions if you can do it, but you can feel safe going to Azure Pipelines as well at the moment. API token as part of a run command, how would I integrate that as a secret? So I was actually doing this in that demo. That LifeX, the light bulb thing, needed a token, like a personal access token. I would just add that as a new, we'll show this, add this as a new secret and paste that in. So give it a name and paste it in. And then in your actual action itself, you just refer to it like this using that syntax, secrets dot whatever you've called it. That's kind of as easy as it gets. You don't need to do anything else with that one. Ant's a Java-based build tool. Okay, so yep, similar to Ant. I guess Ant would probably, I think, more align with something like MS Build or .NET Build, I think, rather than a process, but I could be wrong there. Can steps point to any GitHub repo? Can we create custom steps? Yeah, you can absolutely create your own actions. There's a syntax for it and a standard for it as well, but you can have your own private repositories that contain actions, as long as the right manifest files are there and the right, the right code that runs is there. You can absolutely do that yourself. I've written an action before to talk to Azure Machine Learning, and it's not actually that difficult. The docs are pretty good on how to get started as well. Plus, all of those actions are open source, so you can fork one that's already there or just clone it and disconnect it and create your own and start from there. So pretty easy to get started. Cool. All right. So let's just talk. So many shortcut keys. Let's just talk a little bit more about what we saw there and what GitHub Actions for CI/CD can do. So the templates can get you started. They're a really good place to start for whatever language, whatever platform you're using. The triggers will let you kick things off when there's a push, and you can filter based on, tag and path and branch and all that kind of stuff. That's great. Or you can do triggers on pull requests. You can have multiple triggers in there. You can do all sorts of stuff with that. And then the dependent jobs means that you can have these jobs that all run dependent on each other. So you could build 5 things in parallel and then have a release that depends on all of those having completed for a bit more efficiency. Now, there are a lot of actions. So we did a little search there for Maven and came up with 26, I think. If you go to github.com/marketplace/actions, when I did this last night, there were 6,062 actions that came back. And incidentally, this is about 400 more actions than I got the last time I did a presentation like this, which was almost exactly a month ago. So there's another 4,000 out there. Good and bad, obviously, if there's 6,000 marketplace actions and 5 of them are good, that's an issue. So you do have to do a little bit of investigation sometimes to work out which ones are the good ones. Starred repos are a pretty good way of checking too. There are also a lot of triggers. So I talked about a couple of them. So ones like push is one that you'll certainly use for CI/CD, and pull request as well. But there's ones like check run. So every time there's a pull request that goes back in, it'll do a check run to actually run a workflow to make sure that'll be all right. There's creation of things, deletion of things, stuff to do with issues, wikis. When you change a repository to public as well, that's an action that you can. That's a trigger that you can trigger your workflow on, and there's tons and tons of other things as well. This is actually unlimited, and I'll talk about that in a sec. There's pretty much an unlimited list of actions that you can use. The workflow itself, when you're actually putting these actions together, or these workflows together, it can be a little bit tricky. The documentation is there, but the discoverability is a little bit off sometimes. I would highly recommend that this is kind of the best place to start. And this is just a short URL link to a location, actions syntax. So this will give you the workflow syntax. You can also see your context and expression syntax. So if you're using expressions like that if command to say always run this step, that's in there as well. Workflow commands, the events, authentication, secrets, all that kind of stuff. If you get stuck, if there's something that you know that the workflow knows in context, for example, I think in my one I said with the build light, job.status, finding out what holds the status of that job at that particular point is can be tricky. You might not know exactly where that is, but there are a whole lot of different bits of context that are available to you. My pro tip for finding out what's there is to run that command. If you run this echo of converting something to a JSON string, so the github.event object, it'll just dump this this gigantic JSON document of all of the things that live in github.event. It's a good way for discovering where a certain bit of information exists in your in the context that you're running. Once you start looking for this information, this can be really handy. All right, so yep, and you might have seen the build light. It's really difficult doing this in Mirror. There you go. That's gone green, so that succeeded. So what we're going to do is we're going to do more stuff. We're going to do some not CI/CD. So we've done the CI/CD stuff, but it's CI/CD and beyond, and the beyond part is a little bit more interesting. And it'll give you a bit of an exposure to how powerful GitHub Actions can actually be. So let's just jump back here, and we've got, let's go to our actions and we'll have a look. So we can see first our lighting completed, so that completed there. But let's have a look at actually, let's just look at that one. That's the multi-job with the lighting in there as well. And you can see there's 2 jobs here, there's build and release. Both of these jobs completed in that length of time. And we've got this drop artifact. So we've got this 443 meg zip file. Let's just cancel that. So I can actually pull down what it was that I deployed and have a look at it if I want to. The website itself, because I keep forgetting to actually change anything, it's still saying this, but you can trust me that it was actually deployed again. So we can see our build completed. We uploaded our artifact, and then in the release, we downloaded that artifact and deployed it to the website. The other reason you might want to do this is you might have different components that you need to deploy building in different locations, or different operating systems. So you might have a Windows component and a Ubuntu component, for example, or a Linux component. If you have multiple jobs, you can do them all in their agents that run on those machines. All right, cool. That's all fine. That's fantastic. Everybody's happy. We can do CI/CD. Let's look at the not CI/CD stuff. So we're going to do a couple of things to this existing workflow just to make sure that it is going to help. So I'm just going to do a path ignore. Hang on, let's just do that. So this is just specifying in that push. We're going to push whenever there's a change to our main branch, but I'm going to ignore anything that's in that workflows. And the reason is I'm going to make a few more workflows here. I don't want it to kick off all of our workflows every single time, or I don't want it to kick off this build every single time I add a new file to this location. So I can say ignore anything that goes in here. You probably won't want to do this specific thing in your build, but you might want to ignore, for example, a docs folder or a generated folder that you don't really care about if it updates. You don't want to redeploy your application if that folder updates. So that can be really handy. The other thing I want to do, just to show you, is I want to put in another trigger here. And this trigger is a workflow dispatch trigger. Now, what workflow dispatch will do is it will let me deploy manually. So right now, it requires a change to my repository to do anything, to actually kick off a new build. If I add this workflow dispatch, it means I get a button that'll let me do it. So, so let's just update those new triggers, push. And the one thing you'll notice as well is if we go back to our actions, even though I've pushed that, that change, it's not kicking off a new workflow. So if I go in here, you can see that change is there, but I haven't kicked one off because I'm ignoring that path. I do have this button now though, so I can trigger that workflow. The other thing that's possible is sometimes there's some inputs that you need in your workflow to actually get them to run. So I might want to actually specify those inputs and say, well, when I run this manually, here's an input that I need, which I would have got automatically if I'd run it as part of a change to my repo. All right, I can ignore that. All right, so we've got this workflow dispatch, that's fine. Let's create a new workflow. So I'm going to create one just to kind of be a little bit nicer with that light, just to add a bit of interactivity. Let's just do this. We'll make it white so everyone can see. And so we've reset it. I'm going to add a new file. We're going to make it bulb.yaml. And in this, I'm going to create a new workflow. Just, you didn't want to see me type that, trust me. We're going to call it LifeXBulb. Now it's going to trigger not on a push, it's going to trigger on a comment for an issue. So when somebody creates a comment, an issue comment in my repository, it will kick this off. It'll also kick off on a workflow dispatch, so I can manually do this, and I'll show you why in a second. We're setting the same stuff here. We've got a build job. It runs on the latest Ubuntu, and we're adding a couple of environment variables just so we can use them later on in that job, and they're just being pulled from the secrets. So I've got a access token and I've got a bulb ID. So this is how we address that bulb behind me. First thing I'm going to do is just going to comment on what that comment looks like, and here you can see why I might wanted to might have wanted to dump the contents of that GitHub.event. This was the easiest way for me to find out what the comments actually were. It turns out that they live in github.event.comment.body. So that's the comment left in the issue. I'm going to do some fancy stuff here to look for and strip out an HTML color code. So hash followed by 6 hex digits, and then echo some stuff to make sure that that it's a valid color and then set that light color. Now here I have two more steps. They're written by, these are actions written by this person, Lan and BR. So this is somebody I don't know, but they wrote this action that I can use. It's a LifeX trigger action, and it lets me set a color. So here I'm setting the output of this previous step. So this step I've got here, I'm setting the light color. And so here, I'm calling it set light color. And here I can refer to that output as steps set light color, outputs light color. How to actually set that output is this kind of syntax here. So set output, I just dump this to output, set output, give it a name and then an actual value. Now, this is kind of just an example to show what can be done. All I'm really doing here is looking at a comment, looking for a hex code, and then putting that in a variable that I can use in a subsequent step. So it's basically going to set this to that color for 15 seconds, but only if somebody's left a comment. If it was a workflow dispatch event, in other words, if I clicked that button, then I'm not going to have a color because there's not going to be an issue here. Not going to be a comment on the issue here. So in that case, I'm just going to set it to white for 5 seconds. All right, we all clear? I'm just going to jump over here just to make sure everybody's clear on what we're doing. Cool, nobody's asked any questions, so I'm just going to assume that that's all right. Now, the interactive part, sorry, just move over. If you want to actually leave a comment on that action, and it's not going to work very well if I don't commit and push this. So that is a link, and if you're looking at my camera, that QR code's still up there. That is a link to the issues, or you can go to brdy.in/GitHub Lite, and that'll take you to the issues. You can put in any comment that has an HTML color code in it, and that light will change color. So while we continue, we'll just let that go and see what colors people choose. Let's just make sure that that's actually going to work. Let's go to issues, change my light. Nobody's left a color yet. Let's test. Yeah. That's a valid one, I think. Let's leave a comment and we'll watch the action. So we've got this LifeX bulb action now. It's running, change my light. And hopefully, I don't actually know what color that is. It'll probably be reddish. BA. There we go. And there you go. So that color was greenish, it seems. So I did that for 15 seconds and then it'll change back to white. So feel free to go to that issue and chuck in a few. If nobody's actually up for it, no worries, you've seen it work. Right. There's Nadia's just put that link up there as well. So while we're doing that, and if you want the QR code, just have a look at my camera rather than that slide, which I'm going to move on from. So there's thousands of actions here. There's unlimited triggers, effectively. We can do whatever we want, and unlimited workflows. Now, what do I mean by unlimited triggers? Like I gave you a list of triggers that could work. There's also one more trigger that is super useful. Okay, thanks, Brian. And so Andres, by the way, what will happen here is this will do the build, but it will fail out because there's no HTML color code in there. So that build will actually not work, or that comment will not work, but that'll actually fail that build, I think, of that workflow. Right, there's one more that I want to show you though, which is really handy for this kind of unlimited idea. Let's do repo dispatch. So this one, this would be this one. So this is a really simple example of a workflow, but the trigger I'm using is called repository dispatch. Now, repository dispatch is a little bit like workflow dispatch in that it's triggered by something that you do. In the case of workflow dispatch, it's me clicking that button. In repository dispatch, it's somebody hitting an endpoint, an API. So here, there's the red one that Brian sent, I think. Here, I'm looking for somebody hitting my endpoint, and the name I'm looking for is Damo Dispatch. So somebody hitting the endpoint and identifying it as this Damo Dispatch type. All it's going to do is run hello world, and again, it's going to look for the message in that dispatch event. And again, I found that out by dumping that github.event. But client payload gives you a JSON document with a payload, and then message is my kind of message that's in there. So let's just commit and push this, and then I'll show you how that actually works. Commit and push that. All right, let's jump back over here. I've got a few more. Cool, thanks, Rob. Nice purple back there. All right, so now I have this repository dispatch example. Obviously, I've run this a few times with the same name, but how does that actually work? So let's have a look at, I'm just going to do a curl request. So basically just a straight HTML request, or HTTP request, sorry. So it's a post, an HTTP post. I need to give it a GitHub personal access token. I've stored mine in an environment variable, so I'm not typing it out in front of everybody. So that's my personal access token. And then the URL that I hit is api.github.com, the repos / the owner / the repository name / dispatches. And that's it. The payload, the thing that I actually need to send, has event type. And so that matches my Damo dispatch event type. And again, I can name this whatever I want to identify it specifically for my application. And then client payload dot message. So that matches here, client payload message. And so I'm just saying hello Reactor here. So let's actually change that. So you know I'm not faking anything. All right, so let's kick that off, and it fired that event. We'll come over here. You can see it's actually running it, and in our build, we're starting that workflow run. We'll just get a hello world echoed with hello fun people, presumably. There you go. Hello fun people. So super simple example, but you can see the power that exists there. So any third-party application can, or any script or anything you have outside of GitHub, as long as it can hit that URL, that one here, with the correct syntax, this Damo dispatch, you can run any workflow inside your GitHub repo based on any event that happens anywhere. So that's what I mean by unlimited triggers, effectively. Again, you can have as many of these workflows as you want. You could have 1,000 workflows running in your repository. As far as I can tell, there's no actual restriction on the number of workflows in a repo. It's probably going to get quite difficult to manage after you've got a handful, but there you are. You can use as many as you want. All right. Now, I've shown you a bunch of stuff for CI/CD and for not CI/CD, and I'm sure a lot of you are there thinking, okay, cool, but what about this thing that you didn't mention, or this thing that you didn't show? The key ones for me that I would have asked about are approvals and gates. So in other words, I do my build, I deploy to a test environment, and then I need to go through an approval process before I get to my next environment, or an automated gate to make sure that it's actually performing okay before I go to my next environment. The other thing is this general idea of continuous deployment workflows. So maybe I want to do a canary deployment and then monitor that for a while and then deploy that out to the rest of my machines or rest of my target audience. Or maybe I want to do a blue-green deployment, any kind of continuous deployment workflow. Those things currently don't really exist. GitHub Actions was started basically as a do a thing when something happens. As it's morphed into this kind of more powerful CI/CD system, they've identified, yes, there are definitely gaps, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that those are the absolute highest priority things on the GitHub Actions team's plate. There's a website here. If you go to github.community/c/github-actions, you can see the list of all of these most requested, things that people want. And you can rest assured that they are working on these really, really hard. So right now, this whole idea of approvals and gates and continuous deployment workflows and things, that's the story there is not great right now, but it will be very, very soon. If there's something that you can't do right now, Azure Pipelines is certainly a great place to go. If you're using the multi-stage YAML stuff, most of that can be ported over to GitHub Actions or easily translated, I guess, to GitHub Actions if it's time to go there later on, if GitHub Actions can do what you need it to do. Next question I get is pricing. So there's a lot of free stuff. So for any repository at all, you get 2,000 minutes a month. Basically, as you pay more money, you get more access. So free repositories, free build minutes or workflow minutes exist even in private repositories. Public repositories are always free. You can do whatever you want basically with those. The other thing that I might have mentioned as well is that the runtime limits for these workflows is about 72 hours. So you can run these things for 72 hours. The step itself can only run for a little bit less time than that. I can't remember if it's 12 or 24 or something along those lines. The other thing you need to consider is how many of these jobs you can run in parallel. So for a free plan, you can run 20 concurrent jobs. So you can still run 20 actions at the same time, which is pretty amazing. Except if you're running them on Mac OS. The agents work slightly differently there because they have to actually run on a Mac. You can't just spin up a virtual machine and do it there. They have to run on a physical Mac. That's a requirement. And so there are some limits as well on the number of concurrent jobs, but ultimately you get a lot of stuff for free. So it's definitely worth a proof of concept if you wanted to try it. So this question of that we asked at the start of GitHub Actions, what is it? Ultimately, it's kind of a tool that lets you do all the things. It lets you do anything that you want in response to anything that happens, which is pretty impressive as well. And for the most part, it lets you do it all for free. So I was trying some little gimmicky things here, but you can absolutely do things like, and I've done this before, send cards to teams to identify that something's gone to staging, and then based on somebody clicking a button in that card in Teams, you can fire off another workflow to deploy it to the next environment. So you could use chat ops for your CI/CD pipeline as well. Unlimited things that you can do with that. So hopefully the stuff that I've showed you with GitHub Actions has shown you that it's kind of a really powerful automations tool. For pretty much any software workflow. So it doesn't have to be CI/CD. It can be anything at all related to code, or even not related to code. Those workflows can just run whatever you want in response to whatever you want. I've had some really good questions on the way through, but if you have anything else that you would like to ask, now's a really good time. Or even better, if you want me to just kind of try stuff, if it's only going to take a few seconds, I'm absolutely happy to kind of click around and show you things. Otherwise, feel free to leave more questions in the Q&A and take that survey that Nadia has posted as well. That would be super helpful for us for the future. And this will be on YouTube, as Nadia mentioned, fairly shortly after the event. Cool. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Damian. There haven't been any questions now, but as Damian did mention, please feel free to pop them through. While in the meantime, I'm just going to do a very quick update on a few things that are coming up at the Reactor, where you can find some more information about the events that we are running, and also the link for our YouTube channel as well. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen with you all. Perfect. So as you would have seen on our meetup page, you'll be able to see all the events that we do have up and coming. So you can follow our community, see all the events we have globally and locally as well. You can follow us on our Twitter channel at MSFT Reactor, and the recording of Damian's session will be up in the next couple of days on our YouTube channel. I did pop the link in the Q&A at the top, but just a reminder, it's youtube.com/Microsoft Reactor. If you do have any questions about what the Microsoft Reactors are, or if you're keen to get involved, feel free to email us at reactors@microsoft.com and we can get in touch with you. As Damian mentioned, I popped in a survey link in the Q&A. If you do have any feedback, please share that with us. I thought I'd share a couple of events that are coming up. We are kicking off the second part of the APAC Power Apps of Big Kids and Little Kids. So this is going to be a Christmas edition session where they'll be able to learn how to make an interactive Christmas card. And backed by popular demand, we are running a second part on how to start an applied machine learning business, tips, tricks, and tools. This session does not get recorded. We are looking at potentially making it a little bit of a course, but it's a really fun session to get your hands on. If you do want to see the international events that we have up and coming, you can register to be part of our newsletter as well at aka.ms/reactor email sign up. We send out monthly newsletters that have some great content shared from our reactors globally. So yeah, I've just taken a look, Damian, I think you have answered everybody's questions today. It was really fun with the interactive light as well in the background. So that was really, really cool. I just wanted to say a big thank you to the audience for joining us today. If you do have any more questions, feel free to pop them in. I'll be around for about a few minutes after the session, or you can leave them on our meetup page as well, where I'll post a link to the recording of the session. And a huge, huge thank you to Damian for taking us through the GitHub Actions session today.
Cool. You're welcome.
Awesome. Did you have anything else to add, Damian, or should we wrap this bad boy up?
Not really. Very happy to wrap it up. I'm always available on Twitter. I'm there 20 something hours a day sometimes. So reach out on Twitter.
Awesome.
Or, yeah.
I will add Damian's Twitter handle in the Q&A as well for you, for those who do want to follow along and may have some other questions to ask. So for now, I want to say thank you again, Damian. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you all again soon. Bye for now.